right. What is Atlanta's identity today, Gus?
Ooh, what is Atlanta's identity today? Whenever I come to the city, I'm here at least every other month because my family's all still here. There are parts where I walk around MLK and I can't recognize anything. It's like it's almost futuristic in just how much new architecture is up that you can't really recognize. You know what I mean? Have you been to Chicago?
Have. Last time I've been twice, but the last time was like 2016, I
Do
believe.
you notice how in Chicago when you walk around there is a kind of identity and
It
essence
is,
to this
man.
to the buildings and people.
I love Chicago. Yeah, yeah,
Right. And again,
yeah,
it's just like and first time I went there, I noticed it. It
yep.
wasn't something that I just
It's the
somebody told.
vibe of it.
Yeah, it's a vibe of
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
But when you walk around MLK out here, or
Feels
you
very corporate.
yeah,
Everything is.
everything is so corporate and just the shapes of buildings all look like something from some futuristic sci-fi. The Mercedes Benz logo at night. I mean,
In the
again,
stadium too. Like it's just like too
yeah,
futuristic to me.
that's what I'm saying. It's
Yeah.
like there's no real identity for the city because it's such a transactional space
Facts.
now. The political economy of Atlanta used to be, and to a certain extent, relatively, it still is kind of a distribution hub.
Right.
That's why 285 was built because everything is distributed and is circulated through Atlanta, right? But when you go to the central part of the city, the heart of it, Trinity Ave, MLK, etc., what do you see? You just see transaction. You don't see people. You don't see home. You see transaction. You see tourism. It's a visitor city. That's all. They don't want you to live here or to reside. The identity is spend your money and go. They're
Sounds
trying.
like
It's
Vegas, huh?
yeah. I
Yeah.
was just about to say
Yeah.
they want it to be like like a little Vegas, but even Vegas it feels a little more homely. At least they'll give you a decent meal there. Here they done closed all they closed all the local good spaces. The Busy Bee's still popping for a little bit, but I don't know. I'm kind of wary. They're closing down JR Crickets and all these other local spots. So I'm being facetious to say that there's very little here that you can identify with as wanting to build a home. And so therefore the identity of Atlanta is exactly what Andrew Young wanted. He wanted it to be a transactional space. And that's what the power brokers of Atlanta have done is they've made it into a transactional area. I don't feel welcome or at home in any part of the central city anymore. The one that I grew up in. Just don't. There's just nothing here for me anymore. And all my people have been driven out. They live in Cobb and Henry and Marietta and all these other places that are an hour and a half from the city now. That's all they can live. Lawrenceville. I mean, the very idea that Lawrenceville now is
It's
probably
popping.
it's a black area now.
Chateau Elan, Gus. We got people moving out to Chateau Elan now.
People don't understand, like, you could
That's
not
far.
go to Lawrenceville in the 2000s or the 90s because there were no black folks. And again, people had to find home in places away from the city.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's no there is an identity, but it's one that is unfortunately is anti-black working class. You're not welcome here.
Good people, what's up? What's good, y'all? I am blessed to be your host, Caleb Smith. Today's guest, very special guest, man. Super excited about this. Atlanta native, fellow Atlanta native, which is very hard to say these days.
Very hard.
Black intellectual, um, just seeing everything, brother, that you've been doing in this space. I salute you, Dr. Gus Wood. How you feeling, brother?
Very much appreciated, brother.
Yes,
Peace
sir.
be unto you.
Yes, sir.
I love this platform. I love
Thank
the
you.
work that y'all are doing as well.
Thank you,
And this
brother.
is kind of what I've always been talking about, how, more than an intellectual, I'm more of a Walter Rodney guerrilla intellectual. Whereas, and I take the work that I do in the academy and I transfer it to the work I do on the ground as an activist as well, because we can't separate ourselves anymore. So being able to come on your platform
Love.
and do this work and connect together, I think that that's really the most powerful thing and how we bring legitimate material transformation that we need at this time. So I appreciate y'all so much.
Talk about it, man. Talk about it. Author of Class Warfare in Black Atlanta, Grassroots Struggles, Power, and Repression Under Gentrification. Brother, that title, man, when I was scrolling on social media and I saw that book, I'm like, yo, who is this guy, man? Why this title? Why this book now, Gus?
Well, again, I think that that's probably the biggest thing I want people to get out of the book is that we tend to try to placate the seriousness of the situation
Mm,
by saying that, well, it's always been like this, or gentrification is something that always occurs. And when you do that, you get more into the individualization of poverty, racial oppression, etc., and it starts to become this cultural pathology foolishness that came out in the 1980s to try to erase the structural oppression that causes the kind of poverty that has colonized us as black folk and other poor people in the United States and abroad, right?
mhm,
And so by calling it class warfare and actually getting at the heart of the structural problems, the actual warfare it is, because there are no winners or losers. Like both sides, we're constantly fighting for self-determination.
mhm,
The black working class people across the globe, we're always seeking self-determination. We want to be able to have decision making ability over how we live our lives, right? And that means that we will need access to the basic necessities: food, water, shelter, clothing. And right now, we don't have those things, and we have to literally fight in a warfare to just get those. People are trying to think about having access to cars, transportation, better jobs, all this other stuff. And we're sitting here fighting just to be able to have access to food right now. And so that's what I'm saying is that we have to conceptualize this as warfare so that number one, we're putting the seriousness back into black struggle. And the second reason is that if we don't see it as warfare, then we're going to start to think of it as individual this, individual that. When instead, this is a fight over resources, because the best means for us as people to visualize a future where we are all living an equal or more equitable life, then we're going to have to tap into the resource deprivation that the opposition has used to try to dismantle and put us fighting against each other, as they often do. And that's really why the title is Class Warfare, and it's about power.
mm. Wow. Hey, we already starting off hot, Gus. Bro, in your book, excellent, powerful quote here. The socio-historical experience of the black worker in Atlanta encompasses the contradiction of the American dream.
Yeah.
Man,
Yeah.
reading that, I was like, bro, that's right on the money. Explain that for me.
I mean, and then again, it's like I'm not trying to be a prophet, because
Right.
this is based in a historical foundation. But when you look at what's happening today, that quote reverberates
Yeah.
every day, because this idea of our experiences of being stolen from our homelands
Mm,
and being brought here as labor to basically extract every ounce of labor out of our bodies. The average black person that was brought over from slavery, the numbers were over half of us died within 7 years.
mm,
So our life expectancy during the period of slavery was maybe 20s, 30s. We're lucky if we got the 30s, because it was a 7 year period before our hearts gave out.
wow.
Like we just we were worked so hard, right? And we were never paid for that labor. But at the same time, the American empire grew to its strongest position because of cotton, because of the materials we made for their warfare, their ability to conquer and capture, all the stuff that happened in World War One, World War Two. Anything that you witnessed America building power on, both domestically and internationally, was off the sweat and backs of black workers. And so again, that's what it means, is that our experiences as a proletariat, meaning a working class, meaning they were extracting our labor, is our dominant position in juxtaposition to America's rise. They kept us down. And that's what we call a colonial relationship. We are colonized to the American empire. As they profit, capitalism grows and grows and grows to a specific point to where now they have trillionaires now, something that isn't even feasible by our brains to count. But we're still fighting to have over 70% labor participation rate. They just announced that they're going to remove the professionalization of nursing, which is one of the strongest strongholds for black women ever. Like that was one of the major reasons why black women
Mm,
became one of our core, powerful groups outside the 1980s to start going into professional fields. So again, what's the first thing that the ruling class does? They go after the specific spaces where we're gaining power, like nursing. So essentially, that's what that quote does. That quote is it goes across time, right? We have to always understand what our position is in the American structure as the empire wanes and grows. What if we as black folks actually gain? We own 0.1% of the wealth generated by United States capitalism. And even though you have Michael Jordan, Oprah, LeBron, etc., we still own 0.1% of the wealth generated by this country. So that's what I'm saying is that it grows across time and space, where that quote shows that we are a colonized people and that our basis and our history is resisting and fighting for our self-determination. And that's why I'm pushing for us to stop the infighting. And that's what that's why the class element is that we spend way too much time internally fighting each other instead of building a united front against the opposition that's been taking us for 400 years, but y'all. So
Yes, sir.
yeah,
Wow. Excellent, Gus. Because, man, growing up here in Atlanta, right?
yeah,
Something that I found so interesting. You talk about this, man, in the book where we see Douglas County go from 25% black to 75% black,
hmm,
right? Clayton County, right? We see
hmm,
Riverdale in the 80s, 90s pop up all black.
yep,
My family, right? My father from Cascade, but I grew up in Peachtree City
oh yeah,
in the suburbs.
yeah,
But then we would go to church in Riverdale. I would play basketball at Brady Gym off of College Park.
most definitely,
So we would do things, activities downtown, but we would live outside of downtown. And
yes
then I
sir,
noticed all of my friends, same exact thing. But then my father, he grew up APS school system,
yeah,
went to this school, the Dougs, the Mays, all these schools.
yeah,
But then our kids, us, all of us, we're going to these white institutions, these white schools, but our parents are from Atlanta. Gus, how do we get to this like transition point to where black Atlanta natives started to move out to the suburbs and taking their money, resources, that
yeah.
upper class moving to the outskirts opposed to staying right off of Boulevard still, Grant Park, these areas? How did it change so fast?
Well, it's really interesting because you have to go back to the 1970s, and this is I want to make sure that everybody knows that this wasn't solely an Atlanta
Mhm.
situation. This was happening globally,
Yeah.
actually. That Atlanta expedited it because of the Olympics, which I'm sure we're going to talk about later. But initially, after the 1960s, you saw some of the most powerful stuff coming out of the Black Power movement. The Black Power movement is the response to the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement gets the Civil Rights Act of 64, Voting Rights Act of 65. But when you actually talk to the black working classes across the country, they felt like, well, here's the situation. Why should I want to go and sit in a restaurant when I can't afford the meal? Right? So their argument was that the civil rights movement didn't address the material realities of the masses. Remember, the black working class in this country has always been over 90%. Despite what the media shows you, there's only a 1%, 2% middle class and a 0.4% upper class. Most of us are working class. So when the Black Power movement comes up, it's off of the material demands of our communities, saying that we want to have direct control over our lives. And they typically did it through going after the institutions that directly affect the black community. So we're talking public schools, we're talking hospitals, and we're talking police violence and surveillance. The main space they did it in was in labor, that they would use strike power. And this is across the world, it's specifically in the United States, they would use strike power to win demands to improve the conditions of housing, keeping the police out of the neighborhoods, better wages, cooperative economics, all kinds of stuff. If you look through the data, and so capital has to respond to that because typically capital has been, after World War II. People are making a lot of money. The Marshall Plan's in play. So they're spending money rebuilding Europe and investments and et cetera, et cetera. They weren't expecting all of these guerrilla, indigenous, powerful movements across the world. Capital has to respond because they're teetering on losing something important. They're teetering on losing agency, autonomy, and the workers becoming more conscious. Remember, this is at the time of Franz Fanon. Amilcar Cabral, Claudia Jones, all these amazing revolutionaries, Steve Biko, South Africa. So a lot of people, Martin Luther King, of course, Malcolm X, et cetera, et cetera. This is all happening at the same time. So capital has to respond. So what do? They say, well, we're going to privatize the public resources. So as Black folks are living in cities now, we have a lot of public resources at this time: Baltimore, Atlanta, Gary, Los Angeles, etc. The first thing that has to happen is they have to dismantle the labor sites. That's the key thing. So you saw 3 big auto plants in Atlanta shut down, and those were some of the biggest, best paying jobs for Black Atlantans for a long period of time. And then, of course, the 1977 sanitation strike, which some of my relatives were involved in, where Maynard Jackson did it before Reagan did it. Now this is important. Maynard Jackson's the first person to fire striking workers, which Reagan's gonna take that model and do it in 1981. So Maynard did it first, and it dismantled the capacity. Remember, that public sector unions in Atlanta were 95% Black. So when he fires them all and basically destroys the capacity for public sector unionism in the city, then we lost one of our biggest resources to really keep our cities thriving through working class demands. This was about Black workers wanting something for ourselves. And so what ends up happening, as you say, and this begins in late 1970, 1980, 1980s, when prices start to go up, because now the Chamber of Commerce, and I'm talking about both white and Black capitalists. So we got Jesse Hills there. Some of the other big names are there. Dillard Mumford is the big white capitalist in the city at the time. And they're saying we got to get these poor Black folks out of the city because they are dangerous. They want too many things, and we want this Georgia World Congress Center, right? We want this, we want to be able to bring international banks to Atlanta. So we have to create an anti-working class policy through the Chamber of Commerce's planning committee, CAP, Central Atlanta Planning. And they are the ones that create the gentrification plan in 1970 that's going to take hold over the next 20 years. And so you start to see less and less African Americans being able to find stable housing in the city and having to look at places like Douglas County. If you know people from Douglas County in the 1980s, the Ku Klux Klan had a weekend thing they did where they rode around Douglas County every weekend. And I know this for a fact because my mother saw it. So again, this was a place that Black folks were not allowed to be in specific parts of the day. And in 2025, Douglas County is overwhelmingly majority Black. Cobb County, all of us that grew up in the 2000s will tell you,
Hey, don't drive to Cobb.
you never rode around Cobb County unless you knew that you had your license, your gas was filled, and you had no issues at all. You didn't have no warrants out on you or nothing because Cobb County was looking. That's why you had to tint your car, because they wanted to look in and see if a Black person was driving, you getting pulled over. And I got pulled over all the time in Cobb County. But now when you fast forward, the demographics have changed now to where Cobb is getting majority Black. And so that's what I'm saying, is that it all started with the leadership of the city with the Chamber of Commerce coming together and saying, we have to create a policy and programs that are anti-Black working class. We have to get them out of the city so that we can bring our profit dreams to the city. Because if we try to bring the Georgia World Congress Center, we try to bring all these banks and all these other international businesses, the Black working class are going to fight back because they want their neighborhoods, they want their water, they want their jobs, their public schools. So we have to destroy all those things to bring in our dreams. That's what the upper class Black and white people of the city said. So that's how it started.
Wow, Gus. Hearing that, brother, instantly I thought about what you talk about this expansively, potential ground rent. What exactly is that concept? Because, bro, I don't think people like truly understand outside of here that, man, Atlanta downtown, even right now,
Exactly.
Grant Park, I'm like one of 2 Black people in this building. Everybody
Exactly.
else is all white. But Grant Park, if we go back years later, the Black Belt, to your point, Pittsburgh, all these areas, Old Fourth Ward is now white. You
All
got people on the
completely.
belt line.
Yeah.
Potential ground rent. What exactly is that, guys?
No, I'm glad you brought that up because that's essentially what the Chamber of Commerce is thinking. They're saying that we have all this property here and there's a potential to make profit on things that are not being used. So the first thing I want to do is, and I'll use the best example. When I first started being able to rent an apartment, one of the things that a lot of people, and I didn't notice at the time, but if you think about it, around my first apartment I got in 2009, 2010. When you get your lease agreement, you notice that it's not just the rent, it's also
It's like
the
amenities.
yeah, it's also the amenities.
Right.
So we're talking about a what they call a exercise center, but it's just it's one treadmill or one bike and maybe a couple of weights. We're talking about a laundry for an entire building, but it's just one washer and one dryer. So in other words, they find ways to add surcharges that you're paying monthly. That's potential ground rent. So it's not just your base rent anymore. You have a potentialized extra rent on top of that that increases the profits. And what the Atlanta Chamber of Commerce said is that, and that's just a very basic understanding, we can do this with the Georgia World Congress Center. So imagine taking that example and making it into something as large as the World Congress Center, where you had international corporations across the globe that come every month to that center that rent it out. When you look at their lease agreements to rent that stuff out, their amenities are over a dozen plus. So that's what I'm talking about in terms of their argument. And this is key to everything about what's happening now in Atlanta with Dickens, etc. Their argument is that we, as Black working class people, are not valuable enough to use the resources that generate this potential ground rent. But we have others like sports teams, like banks, like other corporations that will come to the city and extract that potential ground rent in a stronger means because they have more social, economic, etc. capital to do so. So that's essentially what potential ground rent is that Black folks don't know how to use it. So get them out of the way so that we can start taking stuff out and adding extra fees. It's kind of like, I don't know if you noticed this, but everything now is monthly charges. Like they're moving away from
All subscription
yeah,
based.
you cannot buy something anymore. Everything is now subscription only. And that's what in the next 10 years, you're not going to be able to like buy a TV anymore. You're going to have to pay a subscription to own a television, to own, like when you get your car and stuff. You have to pay subscriptions that now when you buy a car, you to get heated seats, you got to pay a subscription to keep your heated seats going now. So again, all of that comes out of the 1980s and 90s of the potential ground rent that city governments working with their chamber of commerces were sitting in rooms planning out how gentrification will actually look.
Wow, guys. Classism is so big
Mhm.
here in this city,
Yeah.
always has been, right? Back to the 80s, Maynard Jackson.
Yeah.
How did our Black elite start to get separated from Black working class folk, right? How did that shift start to happen?
Great question. It actually started back in the 1890s, post Civil War, where you had Black workers coming to the city. And again, this is a key city from the Civil War. You know, Sherman burns the city to the ground to end the Civil War, just completely destroys it. So Black folks came to the city to rebuild it, right? And of course, we were met with the same kind of hostilities that we found everywhere we went to try to build our own lives. Of course, we're talking about the 1906 Atlanta race pogrom. I don't call it riot because riot is a depoliticized term. They try to say that white folks just got mad one day and decided to just kill Black folks. No, it was planned. Those things are always planned because they're trying to cleanse us from the space. So in other words, what I'm saying is that the reason that class becomes such a hardcore issue is because, unfortunately, the interests of some members of the African American community are in the interest of money, right? There's this amazing book by not Grady Willis. The golden age of black nationalism. It is not good that I cannot remember the author's name because it's the foundational book on this very issue where classes comes out of where you had free blacks during slavery who understood that slavery was going to end following the Civil War, and they were creating a list of items to civilize, quote unquote, enslaved people when we became free because we didn't know any better. Some of them agreed that we should be recolonized somewhere else because we weren't good enough. And then it comes into the aspect of, well, we can make a little money, maybe black workers just don't appreciate that. There's another really good book on this, Alabama North by Kimberly Phillips, where you have black workers from the South during the Great Migration who go to Chicago, Philadelphia, etc. And in the Chicago Defender, I'll never forget this because I use this when I'm teaching, that they put a thing in the Chicago Defender of rules for Southerners when you arrive into our town. Don't look idle. Make sure you dress a certain way. Don't upset your white boss because they deserve your respect. And don't be out drinking when you shouldn't be drinking. Don't go to church and make noises. We don't do those things up here. That kind of stuff. And so there was already this kind of cultural animosity between the upper class and the lower class. But then you bring in the aspect of being able to own capital. That's when everything flips. And so 1970s, when you start having this idea of black capitalism, and this is the Richard Nixon era, and Nixon's all in saying, I support black capitalism. People thought he was going to lose the election because of it. But the reason that he won is because you had a lot of really powerful black folks who were coming out saying, yeah, this is the way forward. We finally get a piece of the pie. Like George Jefferson. Well, as my book shows, it was all a smokescreen. That black capitalism actually furthered further eroded the class issues in the black community because you had black leaders with companies not hiring black workers. Yeah, they would actually go and find cheap white workers that lived in the outskirts of Georgia and brought them in because you remember they still have mountain communities outside of Atlanta and the metro area where you had dirt poor white folk. And they would go and get them and say, y'all want to work? I'll pay you 10% of what I would have to pay these black workers. And they would take anything because they ain't had no money. So those are the kind of things I'm talking about is that the more that you push for this individualized accumulation of profit that removed you from the community, the more resentment and anger that black working class people felt because essentially you're individualizing success instead of putting it back into the community itself. Because you rarely see that. The idea was that you're supposed to make your money and bring your community with you, what they call racial uplift. But again, there's a lot of great books out there that prove that that never actually happened, that it was all just propaganda so that you won't be a quote unquote crab in the bucket and get mad at me when I go off to build this bank or build this company and I don't hire you or give you some of my money. You're just a crab in the bucket because I'm not putting any money in the community. So again, there are some deep rooted issues that we as black folks have never truly addressed when it comes to classism. My book is the first book that's ever been written on Atlanta post 1950. There's some good stuff from Tara Hunter. She wrote a great book on black women and class. But my book is the first book post 1950 that directly calls out the class issues in Atlanta as being central to the transformation of the city into the place that is now an anti-black working class city. And I think it's an absolute catastrophe that my book is the first one. It shouldn't be that way. We've had access to these documents and the stuff I researched. The people I interview, they've always been around. So why is my book the first one to address the biggest problem as to why the city has fallen apart?
Gus, why do you think people are so hesitant, afraid even to not talk in this glowingly manner about Atlanta? Because as you know,
Yeah,
growing up here, this person, that person, all of these people are perfect. Atlanta's this black mecca, all of these
yeah,
things. But instead, you are, providing a critique of, hey, not so much. So
yeah,
why do you think people are so afraid or even
yeah.
hesitant, Gus?
So let's be fair
Yeah.
because we as black folks have never we as black folks have mostly had to deal with white supremacist racial oppression, right? That's always been a direct thing, because we're talking about 1600s to 1875, the end of Reconstruction, when class became a major issue in our communities. Now, class had been there, but it wasn't major, because our major issue was direct white supremacy. But then again, when you read books like Sundiata Chajua's America's First Black Town, where you actually have the creation of black towns, Tulsa, Brooklyn, Illinois, places like that, you see that we are steeped in class issues. Like, people are fighting about class within black communities. So again, that's where it becomes a major thing. But before that, we had 300 plus years of dealing with white supremacy as our major problem. So again, I get that's the first thing where I'm gonna be fair. I get the idea that we're always trying to find some way to unite ourselves together. But here's the problem with why that is the worst way to think about it, is that white folks and even ourselves try to make ourselves to be this homogenous blob, that we're just all the same person. We all care about the same thing. We're all in agreement on the same thing. And that's ahistorical. And it's a slap in the face to all the amazing activists, community folks, and just the regular day-to-day people who fought their entire lives for legitimate change. They will tell you that you will never ever have the same agreement with everybody you live with. So it does a disservice to us, and it's one of the reasons why we can't have a real discussion about Atlanta until now. Because now all you have to do is say, well, I don't like what happened, what Shirley Franklin did. Oh, well, at least we're not somewhere where there's a white mayor. I mean, you can imagine what they're doing to black folks in that city. Okay, I'll shut up. All right, you're right. I guess it is better that we got Shirley Franklin. And then the military comes and raids your house because they gentrifying your house. See, you see what I'm saying is that what it does is it creates a barrier so that we can actually have legitimate critique. And again, it's not like my book or me and others. We're not trying to destroy the city, because we love the city. We believe that people, Atlantans, can be the greatest, like, bastion of heart of struggle. And that's what that's what chapter 1 shows, is that when we had the power to do what we wanted to, we were bringing immense change in the face of that kind of oppression from white supremacists in Georgia and the folks in Atlanta. But again, nobody wants to rock the boat, though. Nobody wants to critique the stuff. It really got to me when you saw the whole thing with what was it? It was Killer Mike and T.I. and a few others who came,
2020.
yeah,
You talking about,
who
yeah,
yeah,
the
who came in and
protests.
say, don't you dare talk about our mayors, don't talk about our city leaders. Of course they would say that, because they let them do whatever they want. Of course they called them on the phone and said, hey, can you come out and defend us?
I
And
need a
they went
favor.
out. Yeah, they went out and did it. All the rappers would come out and support the Atlanta government because they let them get away with everything. But I want to see those same Atlanta rappers stop gentrification. I want to see them come out and fight what's happening with this federal government stuff. I want to see them come out and stand the ground against ICE. I want to see all that, but you don't see it, because there is a class positionality in this city that has been at its core for so long now, that it has become like this, like the show Derry and the book, the Stephen King book, It. Derry is one of those places where people just look to the side. When something bad happens, you don't critique it. Now that's supernatural because the monster is making them do that. But here, there's nothing supernatural here. Like, people are expected to turn a blind eye and say that's just what happens in Atlanta when people lose their homes, when public housing goes away, when people have to move to extended stays, where people lose rec centers, where there are no more black teachers in schools, when the Atlanta public school system just throws teachers under the bus in the cheating scandal. Like, I was teaching at Mays High School when that happened. So that's what I'm saying, is that there's this, we have to stop if we're going to be serious about making better lives for all working class folks in this country who are struggling right now, we have to have an honest critique, which is uncomfortable, yes, but we have to have an honest critique if we're going to change the structure.
Wow. Gus, man, if you can, bro, share, your time, experiences at
Yeah.
extended stays where people are coming together, pitching in funds for job interview
Yeah.
fits for people to look presentable to even gain that job. And then that person gains that job and gives back. I had no idea that all of this is going on to where kids and their school buses are being dropped off at motels,
Yeah.
extended stays.
Yeah.
Talk to me, man, about that, Gus.
This is one of the most beautiful things about this is why I have people calling me and just being like, we're so appreciative that this isn't just a book that gazes on just people just beating black people up, taking their stuff. The book is from the perspective of everyday ordinary people doing what they can to survive and to help each other, a collective kinship. And so, as bad as the things are, they close down public housing, right? They give people, and you read the book, they give people bus tickets to nowhere, give them they give them eviction notices in 48 hours. They do all these things. And of course, they dismantle our actual living conditions. And what's the first thing we do when we find a place to live? We build community. Like the great Joe Trotter in all his books, Black Milwaukee, Cold, Class, and Color, Workers on Arrival. The key thing that you notice about Black folks anywhere in history, whether it be in the US or across the globe, is we seek to build community as our first means of resistance. Is that we got to find each other and find out what it is we need and what we have to do. And so when the extended stay boom started in the 2010s, because when you look at extended stays now, people are investing in them more than ever because they're the easiest thing for people to live in now. They're the only place that don't take credit scores. And of course, most African American working class folks either have no credit or things because of racial oppression. We have bad credit, and that happens. So when you go to extended stay, you just pay your money. They don't look up your credit score like if you try to get an apartment or a house. And so it's gotten to the point to where school buses have rerouted now to pick people up at extended stays because there's just so many people that lost their homes over the past 15 years that cannot get apartments, have to live in extended stays now. And so these groups, the first thing they do, because they're living close to each other, just like in the first chapter where I talk about how we define home as Black working class folk, we have a radical sense of home that it's not just a place to lay your head, but it's a sense to build power. And so we look for people in our community to come together and we see, what is it that you need that I can give you? And what is it that I need that you can give me? And we share. So yes, if we want, we don't have a one family Christmas in the extended stay. We have the entire extended stay Christmas for all the kids there, and we all chip in and buy each other presents because it's not blood that's family in these spaces. We're all family again, just how we were in the post-slavery period where we couldn't find our families. So we would build just random families of people that we fought with. And so there was no blood. Most of us don't have real blood relatives in our families because of that period. So we went back to that with the extended stays. And then with the job interviews, it's like the minute somebody has an interview, you pull your money together and you buy them a suit, or you buy them whatever they need for their interview. If they got a training program that they need to pay for to get into the apprenticeship for the trade unions, then you give them the money for the application, to take the test, whatever they need. And then they do the exact same thing for your turn. That's happening across the metro area of Atlanta now. And that's what we have to keep doing to rebuild our community. Because again, we took a hit with gentrification. Just in warfare, you take a hit, but then you come back and you try to rebuild your ranks. And that's what we have to do as they build warehouses to try to put young Black kids in across, Bob Arnold Boulevard and Highway 5, etc. Our response has to be, no, we're going to challenge this at different parts of the county. The counties now have the power to do this. So, yeah.
Gus, man, earlier, hearing you talk, life expectancy was only 7 years
Yeah.
for our ancestors who were enslaved, right?
Yeah.
I think about people and these young people, man, who are working at Amazon, these
Yeah.
warehouses. You can probably work a job like that, backbreaking labor, for 7 to 10 years. Economically, how do we get to this overall point to where now, man, we're seeing, like what you said, labor sites, but these sites now are just all Amazon or it's Tesla, where it's the same billionaires like John D. Rockefeller, Carnegie, that now it's like Gilded Age 2.0. How did this happen here to where we don't see black young professionals getting these jobs in corporate America? Instead, they have to go with a college degree and work at Amazon
Mm.
in Atlanta.
Yeah. Whew. I mean, it happens so quickly too. I think one of the biggest things is that, and then again, this is why the whole thing with Andrew Young is so. You ask anybody in the black community about Andrew Young, they're not going to have the what people think outside of Atlanta, his reputation, because he was very much responsible for in the 2000s when people were screaming about the job situation to Shirley Franklin, first Bill Campbell with the goofy and enterprise empowerment zone thing that was supposed to reinvest job building in the city, and it was completely just it was like a Ponzi scheme, right? So Franklin comes in and essentially doesn't create those kinds of job opportunities, and people are screaming. So you have Walmart and McDonald's coming in and creating all of these new jobs, and people are just like, well, I still can't pay my rent working at Walmart, especially since they won't make me full time. They play around with my hours, so I can't get benefits like healthcare working at Walmart. And you have people like Andrew Young and other members of the government saying, you're being disrespectful. At least we brought this to the city. And I remember when they built all those Walmarts in the late 2000s, they were just all over the area. Northside Drive, and I forget that was the new big
Yeah,
one
it
they
was
built.
huge.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
huge. And the other Publix they built over there too. And then people are like, well, we can't pay our wages that way. And so that's kind of the initial, but then the warehouse situation. And this is something that's in the epilogue of the book, that nobody has invested more in the development of warehouses in the United States more than the metro area of Atlanta, where the vast majority of Black working class folks have been pushed to since gentrification. So what you have is you have literally all of these young folks who either don't go to college or do go to college, but then they're again, let's do the people who go to college first. None of those jobs are available right now because you remember when they were telling folks just go into tech, get you some certifications,
Gus, man,
go.
I graduated in 2019,
Yeah,
and COVID happened right after that.
yeah.
So you were not lying. The tech, and all of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's I mean that's all they were telling me. I would have people because I taught Mays High School before I started my PhD, and they were like, "Oh, you got a degree in history? You didn't want to go into tech? That's where all the jobs are now. No wonder you're teaching high school, and you get degrees in history. We can't do that. Go and get tech. Go and look at the tech job market right now. I mean, it's absolutely gone. And now that AI is coming in, they're really just destroying tech jobs all around. And so you have people more so than ever now going to live at home with their parents after getting college degrees. They say it's close to 50% at this point. And so what jobs are available? And I look at let's do Douglas County because that's where my family was gentrified. What's in Douglas County now that you can honestly say can build a career? Nothing. You got fast food. You have, I mean, the one place that we were happy about when I was just growing up was when they built Arbor Place Mall, because at least that meant you could try to find a different job because there were no malls out there. But even that's now declined because malls are dying. So again, where do you go? You go to a warehouse where they'll tell you, we'll pay you $20 an hour. You don't ever have to worry about missing a check. We pay you every week, but we're going to give you 1/3 of the healthcare. So don't ever get in a car accident or break anything. You're not going to have any paid leave. You're only going to have basic holidays off. You're basically going to be, and you're going to be timed to move boxes at a certain amount. And if you don't make the time, then you're going to get a demerit on your record. And you don't want to lose that $20 an hour now.
So do that for 5 years, what it does to your body. And we're talking about not just the physical, the rupturing of your back and your legs, etc., but also the mental toll of the repetitive motion. Like I talk about in chapter 2 with the sanitation workers, the repetitive motion and what it does is similar to what Chat GPT does when you, because your brain is shutting off specific things it needs to keep your body growing and developing. And when you're doing repetitive motions, it's shutting down parts of the mental process. And that's what we call alienation. And that's why I call this current moment that we're in as Black people sub proletarianization, that we are being sub proletarianized, meaning we are pushed into low wage, unstable, non benefit work that's dirty and is often done by darker skinned people across the world. That's sub proletarianization. And that's what that warehouse work is. And they specifically chose the metro area of Atlanta at the time when most working class, poor, super dirt poor Black folks were moving to those areas looking for jobs.
Come on, brother. Gus, I remember off of Old National. This might have been like 2020, right?
Mhm.
It's a beautiful at the time Black church. That church sold their property and it turned into a big Amazon warehouse.
Yep.
And then out of nowhere, I see people walking to work at Amazon, getting off of MARTA with their heads down. Gus, what words of encouragement, advice do you have, especially for young Black folk that just graduated from college, man,
Yeah.
to walk inside that warehouse every single day here in Atlanta? What words of encouragement do you have for that Black working class?
I think the most important thing that we have to remember is that they can't they can't kill our spirit. You know, that they attempt to with how they work us to death. And unfortunately the life expectancy today is dropping as well because people are overworking their bodies. You know, they try to blame the food and all that, but no, this is the healthiest food that we've ever had in this country. Like people are eating organic everything, but it's no, stop that. No, again, because they want to blame us, you know, the cultural backwardsness of why we're dying. People are getting more. No, it's not heart disease because how we're eating. It's heart disease because we're overexerting our bodies. We're overworking ourselves. I want to make sure people are clear on that. But back to the point, there's so much power in what the working classes are doing right now. I'm writing an article now on the Waffle House workers in Atlanta and the amazing organizing work they're doing. The Amazon workers in Bessemer in Alabama, I was out there for their organizing drive where they tried to unionize, and they are just upbeat and excited. So the thing about people who walk into a space that they do not like, what we have to understand is that the bosses, Bezos and all them, they're putting us in a position to build power because we're working next to each other. We're experiencing the same type of alienation and struggle that the person next to me is. We're talking to each other. And so again, I like to use historical examples. Bacon's Rebellion, 1676. They thought the Africans that they brought over here and they put them next to the European indentured servants on the plantations.
Bad
There's
idea.
no there's no way these folks are ever going to like each other because remember, there's no race yet. There's no such thing as race. They were counting on the religion, the diet, the language to be the things to where they're going to always hate each other. But the first thing they started doing was they started working together. They started talking. They started going around the language issue. They started socializing. They even started marrying each other. And they said those two sentences that no boss ever wants to hear when two people sit down with each other and say, I don't like the way we're being treated. And the next sentence is, me too. That's the cornerstone for the power of collective social movement capacity that could change the sphere of workplace conditions. What we're seeing today with Starbucks workers and their strike currently happening right now, UOP strike. I mean, we're talking about 10,000 Starbucks stores in the United States, and there's a new one being unionized every day because they're putting in they're working next to each other and they're understanding each other's issues. So the best thing that Amazon workers can do, or anybody that works in a warehouse, is to build community, talk with one another, because there's no way they can kill our spirit. Every time that we've been put together in those situations, we've always come out together, collectively fighting. And that's the beauty of class warfare in Black Atlanta or any space in the world, is that we are always going to fight. That is a historical tradition of our condition as Black folk, is we are fighters at heart. That's why we're all still here.
Talk about it, man.
We wouldn't be here
Hey,
if not.
somebody had to fight.
Yeah, because they tried to get rid of us many times. After, after a while, we became expendable, and we're still here fighting across the globe. So yeah.
That's beautiful, guys. Man, another person, bro, that we have to talk about.
Yes,
And
please.
you talked about him earlier
Bring
a little
it.
bit, Andrew Young.
Yes.
In your book, I learned so much. I had no idea
Yeah.
Ambassador Young was going out to Africa, Europe, international trips, giving out brochures of Atlanta, purchasing land, things like that, while the Atlanta child murders were going on.
Yeah.
Break that down for me, please, guys.
Let me tell you how unabashedly arrogant they are.
Mm.
I didn't have to dig deep to find those brochures. Like, you would think that they would be somewhat ashamed,
Yeah.
and like not make sure that stuff didn't end up in the archive. Shout out to my good people over at Woodruff Library as well, because they helped me with my archival research when I was digging through all those files for years. Like, it took me 7 years to write this book. It was just right there in the folder. Like, they had no shame that this was going on at the same time as the Atlanta child murders, where the organization, where Camille Billups was like, where are the people at? Like, where's the mayor? Where are they at? Like, they had no idea where they were because they kept the trip secret. So they're in Japan, they're in Nigeria, they're in all these places selling the land before the people are even off of it. Think about that for a second. The people aren't even off the land yet. And in fact, they're struggling trying to find some security and protection because children are being murdered. And there's nobody there to help them. And the only reason why the federal government gets involved, it is not because of Maynard Jackson, it's not because of the local government, it's because of the organization STOP, the Committee to Stop the Atlanta Child Murders. That organization of amazing Black working class women who were highlighted throughout the book because they're the bastion of the resistance. The Black women there made such a major protest movement throughout the country that the federal government had to take notice. So the only reason why we got any kind of real coverage was because of the Black working class women. The leadership of the city, they said things like, oh, those kids are just prostitutes. Yeah. So they probably sold themselves and they ran away from home. They called the mothers neglectful, said, oh, it's your fault that your child ran away. Like, they would say these things. Like, so again, I'm trying to drive it to this alienation thing again, because there is just this dehumanization at the heart of gentrification. That's why I argue that it's structural violence, because it's not just about taking people's houses or jobs, or this very kind of bourgeois thinking of, well, we have to uplift the area and do. No, it's deeper than that. There's a dehumanization of how they treated folks during these child murders that nobody wants to talk about, that it was class-based. And that's what, the quote is at the beginning of chapter 2. Maynard Jackson doesn't hate us because we're Black. He hates us because we're poor. And that's what we have to understand. That's that's the part that, and again, I don't make it, none of the stuff in the book is personal. But there are two things that Maynard Jackson did, and Andrew Young as well, but two things Maynard Jackson did that was personal. The first one was the firing of the striking workers, and then he sent them an empty job application in the mail just to taunt them. That's personal. The second thing was how the Black mothers were treated whose children were kidnapped and murdered, because Maynard Jackson is spending more money on militarizing the police at the same time that the child murders start,
But yet, none of that police militarization went into protecting those black children. What did it do? It went after surveilling radicals, surveilling activists, going after the Black Panther Party's headquarters, going after the Great Speckled Bird newspaper, going after all the community activists and resources that were helping build power for Black folks out of the Black Power movement. That's what those groups were doing. They were not protecting Black mothers and Black children. So again, we have to be clear that there is a dehumanization and neglect and a lack of respect for people's humanity during the Atlanta child murders that could have stopped it at the heart if they had just treated Black Atlantans as people first. Instead, they went to sell the land that Andrew Young is going to build, going to other countries. And let's be clear, it was both ways. It was transnational. It went both ways. They went out there, and then of course they brought the international corporations to the city as well. So Jackson's gonna start it. Young is gonna finish it using his international relationships and the stuff with the working with dictators and all this other stuff. I mean, again, none of this was hard to find. This is in Andrew Young's papers that I looked through. Like, he was proud of his relationships of doing these things because Andrew Young was a neoliberal. His idea was that we should privatize everything at the behest and, unfortunately, the diminishing returns of public support for people. They shouldn't have state. The idea that they should pull themselves up by their bootstraps, the Reagan stuff, right? That was Andrew Young's mentality. And again, that comes out of the civil rights movement, SCLC ideology. And some of that is in chapter 2. That's what broke up the SCLC in the first place, because some of them wanted to help working people, but others were like, no, they should help themselves. Martin Luther King Sr., very conservative, like, well, we don't want to give handouts to people. It's like, well, people are starving to death. Well, too bad for them. That kind of stuff. So yeah, Andrew Young, not as complicated as Maynard's complicated. Maynard's a little more complicated. Andrew Young, I truly believe, was hardcore neoliberal, privatized, hurt people. Maynard's a little more complicated though.
Yeah.
He comes out of helping people before he's mayor. Yeah.
Indeed, man. Maynard, bro, we about to get to him next. But first, this quote, man,
Okay.
in the book from Andrew Young. Once again, he was tripping on this one. Atlanta has no identity. I'm going to make one.
Yes.
All right. What is Atlanta's identity today, Gus?
Ooh, what is Atlanta's identity today? Whenever I come to the city, I'm here at least every other month because this, my family's all still here. There are parts where I walk around MLK and I can't recognize anything. It's like, it's almost futuristic in just how much new architecture is up that you can't really recognize. You know what I mean? Have you been to Chicago?
Last time I've been twice, but the last time was like 2016. I
Do
believe.
you, do you notice how in Chicago, when you walk around, there is a kind of identity and essence
It is,
to this,
man.
to the buildings and people.
I love Chicago. Yeah.
Right. And again,
yeah.
it's just like, and first time I went there, I noticed it. It
Yep.
wasn't something that I just,
It's the
somebody
vibe of it.
Yeah, it's a vibe of
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
But when you walk around MLK out here,
Feels
you-
very corporate.
yeah, everything is so corporate, and just the shapes of buildings all look like something from some futuristic sci-fi. The Mercedes-Benz logo at night. I mean,
In
again,
the stadium too. Like, it's just like too
Yeah.
futuristic to me.
that's what I'm saying. It's
Yeah.
like there's no real identity for the city because it's such a transactional space now. The political economy of Atlanta used to be, and to a certain extent, relatively, it still is kind of a distribution hub.
Right.
That's why 285 was built, because everything is distributed and is circulated through Atlanta, right? But when you go to the central part of the city, the heart of it, Trinity Ave, MLK, etc., what do you see? You just see transaction. You don't see people. You don't see home. You see transaction. You see tourism. It's a visitor city. That's all. They don't want you to live here or to reside. The identity is spend your money and go. They're
Sounds
trying.
like Vegas, huh?
Yeah, I was just about to say
Yeah.
they wanted to be like like a little Vegas, but even Vegas it feels a little more homely. At least they'll give you a decent meal there. Here, they done closed all they closed all the local good spaces. You know, the Busy Bee's still popping for a little bit, but you know, I don't know. I'm kind of wary. You know, they're closing down JR Crickets and all these other local spots. So I'm being facetious to say that there's very little here that you can identify with as wanting to build a home. And so therefore the identity of Atlanta is exactly what Andrew Young wanted. He wanted it to be a transactional space. And that's what the power brokers of Atlanta have done is they've made it into a transactional area. I don't feel welcome or at home in any part of the central city anymore. The one that I grew up in. Just don't. There's just nothing here for me anymore. And all my people have been driven out. They live in Cobb and Henry and Marietta and all these other places that are an hour and a half from the city now. That's all they can live. Lawrenceville. I mean, the very idea that Lawrenceville now is
It's
probably
popping.
it's a black area now.
Chateau Line, Gus. We got people moving out to Chateau Line now.
People don't understand, like, you could
That's
not
far.
go to Lawrenceville in the 2000s or the 90s because there were no black folks. And again, people had to find home in places away from the city.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's no there is an identity, but it's one that is unfortunately is anti-black working class. You're not welcome here.
Wow. So, Gus, then I have to ask you this. Is Atlanta still the quote unquote black Mecca, or has that always been a myth for us?
It's always been a myth.
Yeah.
It's always been an absolute myth because one of the things that when Atlanta becomes a black majority in 1970, the first thing that the black people who migrated here from different parts of the country, they not migrate to Atlanta because Atlanta has a relatively high black population, etc. The first, because it's like every outsider looking in situation, we hear good things. They get to the city in 1970 and they're like, there's nothing here for anybody. Like, everybody's poor. There's nothing. And they just had the Summer Hill Rebellion in 1966 that was about the lack of having stuff because they took the Boston Braves and said, we're going to build a stadium on top of Summer Hill. But that's not the first time. What they did to Auburn Avenue when they put the highways through the Auburn Avenue. So there's always been this kind of myth making around the Black Mecca that every time we try to build something like Auburn Avenue, which is beautiful, or Summer Hill, which is beautiful, and that's where our folks grew up, Peoplestown, Summer Hill, Dixie Hill, the first thing they do is they dismantle it. They build stuff on top of it. So how is it a black Mecca when every time we as black folks build something here, it's destroyed? I can't find a place where that hasn't happened yet. And people mention Tyler Perry Studio. Tyler Perry Studio isn't built unless it destroys black folks' livability, housing, jobs, etc. Well, black folks are working at Tyler Perry Studios. No, they're not. and he's breaking union laws. They're not getting paid anything. So again, I'm glad you brought this up, good brother, that we have to keep making myths so people can sleep at night, to make themselves feel better, that at least we got a brother in Hollywood making films. Nobody else is being able to get jobs or work in that area. And you could have actually had the building of actual productive job centers and labor there instead of that center. But at least he's making films. Did you ever see the show Black AF?
Oh, I love that show. Yeah,
Okay.
it was cool.
Do you remember that episode where Tyler Perry shows up?
Oh man, you're right. Yeah.
Do you remember it though?
Yeah, it was him.
Yeah.
Kenya Barris. He was.
Yeah,
in it. He
Kenya
was the
Barris'
main-
show.
Yeah.
Do you remember what Tyler Perry was doing in that episode?
Mhm.
When you get after this is over, I want
to
you to go
watch
back
it.
and watch that. He spends the entire time crying to Kenya Barris, "Woe is me. I'm trying to survive in Hollywood."
Mm.
Like, he puts on a whole dog and pony show about he's so oppressed as a billionaire. He is so oppressed by the Hollywood system and just crying and stuff. And I'm sitting there like, I cannot believe what I'm watching here. He doesn't say anything about the people that work for him. He doesn't say anything about the people in the city. He doesn't say anything about black folks in the country other than they should be looking up to me because I'm putting up the fight in Hollywood. And it's just like, these folks are so, these billionaires, and they're so deluded in their myth making that they honestly think that there's some kind of Superman that's doing all these amazing things, and that if we critique them, that we're wrong and we're crabs in the bucket. And it's like, no, when you go out to the outskirts of any part of the city where there are places where you could have built legitimate labor spaces, grocery stores, gardens, all these other things that we talk about that we need as African Americans. Where are these folks at? They're sitting there complaining that they're oppressed. You can't be oppressed if you're a billionaire. I'm sorry. Stop it. You're not the same as any of you or me. If we get stopped by the police, you can say I'm Tyler Perry and I have a lawyer. And they're like, well, I can still be killed by the police. No, here's the thing. You don't go to areas where police surveil. They surveil in Black working class neighborhoods. We don't, just like we never saw Oprah and none of these Bill Cosby, none of them other folks out on MLK when I got my first apartment, where we had shootings almost every week. We ain't seen them out there. So all this talk about we're all Black together and we can all be victims of it. No, you can't, because you're never around the working classes. So again, we have to be honest about the realities of the situation. And then again, I'm not singling out Tyler Perry, even though what he did on that show was embarrassing, but the entire class of billionaires and super high power brokers, they are deluded in their myth making to make themselves sleep better at night, thinking that they are actually helping, but they're not. Because look at the condition of Atlanta today when they've had the power to do things for 25 to 30 years. This is what we got from them. It didn't work.
Man, guys, listen, brother, I am just as passionate as you, bro, because we were off of Forsyth Street for 3 years before here, right? Right across the street, Magic City, world famous, of
Yeah,
course,
Magic
right?
City,
You
yeah.
see millionaires pulling up every single day, all of this. But then outside, homelessness is rampant. You see homeless people everywhere. We would have to call APD every single day for, assistance, helping them out. It was to the point I knew everybody first name basis. But then, man, I would realize we got millionaires right across the street. Peter Street is right up the street. The
Yep.
stadium's right up the street. And we have homeless people walking around sometimes naked,
Yep.
mental issues, all of these things.
Yep.
How did we get to this point, Gus? Because, man, Georgia State, when I was there as a student,
Yeah.
homelessness, Woodruff Park, it was rampant. How did
Yeah.
we get to this point?
One of the hardest things, and this is where we go into the Olympic situation, that in the late 1980s, as Andrew Young is, ending his second term, there was a decision made that we're going to go, the city of Atlanta was going to go after the Olympics, right? That the Atlanta, because of the Georgia World Congress Center and other international business dealings, that Atlanta had become somewhat of a hub now. So how can we circulate capital in a stronger way? How about we bring the Olympics to the city of Atlanta? So just contrary to what people know, they started petitioning for the Olympics in the mid 80s. So it took that long to get the Olympics here in 1996. So in 1998, when it's actually announced that the Olympics will be in Atlanta in 96, that's when the plans come together. And the first person to get on the phone is Maynard Jackson. And they say, listen, what you did in the 70s was masterful. The way you armed the police, the way that you had that incredibly racist police chief, John Inman, until you had to get rid of him through public pressure. But the way that your law and order works, we need you back because we're going to bring the Olympics and we have to get Black folks out of the city and they're going to fight back. So can you do this? And so he comes back and does a term. Now, Bill Campbell, of course, is the mayor for the Olympics, but he's not the Olympic mayor. Maynard Jackson comes back for a third term as the Olympic mayor, and he does the exact same thing that he did in the 70s. He gives as much money as possible that he's legally allowed to give to building the Atlanta Police Department into an occupying force. And so what do you see happening? You see this propaganda that, well, I have to give the police this kind of money because you're not safe when you have homeless people walking around. You're not safe when you have poor people asking for change outside. So you start to see all these bills in the Atlanta City Council passed that criminalize poor people.
especially homeless people. You know, going into Woodruff Park and making sure that you have plain clothes sitting around watching if somebody falls asleep on a bench and putting them in a jail cell, that kind of stuff. If you panhandle or ask for money, then guess what? Then we're going to put you in jail for that. Those kinds of things. Raiding homes. I mean, Maynard's responsible for this one. That there was a bill passed that if you were related in any way to somebody who was known to be around a drug dealer, you could be evicted. Yeah. See, that's what I'm saying is that was a way for them to clear out the area so that they could build not Techwood, but uh the Morehouse suites that were
Oh
for
yeah, I know
that were
what
for
you're talking about.
the
Yeah,
Olympic dorms.
yeah.
Yeah. That
For the village.
yeah,
Yeah,
the village. Thank you,
yeah,
thank you, thank you.
yeah,
But they cleared out a lot of that
yeah.
area to do when they did that.
Mm.
Then they went after Techwood Homes.
Yep.
Clark Howell and Techwood. They went after them after that. So again, there was a specific process that they had to bring back Maynard to do because Maynard's whole thing has always been law and order. Like, despite what people think about him, he's always been about police power. And so, and this goes back to the potentialized ground rent conversation
Yeah.
that you can't just gentrify an area and just that simple because you have to cheapen the property value so that the international buyers will want to buy the property. So what Maynard does is when you surveil and bring in extra police to an area, it devalues the area because if a place is designated as crime ridden, quote unquote, then the property values drop, right? If you label a place as blighted, which involves police surveillance, police walking around or driving the cars around, that drops the property value. If you go on television and you put out all these specials on the local news about how murderous the city is, even though they juke the stats, and I found that, and that's in the book, how they were lying about the stats to increase people's fear that Atlanta was a murder rate capital of the world and all this, all made up. They juked the stats. Why? To devalue the property. That's so key. And so typically we like to separate the police part from the gentrification. Like, no, it's not just about when police shoot people, but police also play a very important role in the political economy, meaning that their job is to work with the city governments, the chamber of commerce to devalue a property because anytime that I basically occupy a zone, and you can see this on the south side of Chicago, you can see this in Atlanta, where I'm at in Champaign, all these places when they occupy a zone, the property values plummet, and that's when the vultures come in and start buying everything up, jacking up the rents and kicking everybody out. And then the redlining starts because then it's like, well, wait a minute now. If I want to get a loan and I'm not a corporate person, then the bank say nope, 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 nope,
Not
nope,
qualified.
not qualified. Sorry. And so again, it all works together, but you can't leave that police part out because then that's when they really start to clamp down on the homelessness. All this ICE stuff that's happening now, this is all stuff they've been doing this to black folks for decades. So I find it to be hilarious when these right-wing black folks online and these what these people call these influencers,
Yeah.
these ADOS clowns and this all this FBA whatever fools. These are paid agents by the right wing telling you to allow ICE and work with ICE to go after immigrants and undocumented people because they're paid agents because they don't understand that no, these same folks were the same people going around and arresting our people since the 1980s, locking us up, shooting us, putting us in jails, mass incarceration. And now we're supposed to support that? That's absolutely ridiculous. So again, that goes into the fracturing of black people. That's how you know to leave that kind of stuff alone. When somebody tells you to allow people to be harassed and beaten, and no, I didn't hear anything from them when they raided that black apartment complex in Chicago and beat those kids and put them on the ground last month. Did you hear anything about them about that? Because they go after black and brown folk. So to go back to the point I was making before, I get hot sometimes.
Hey, you good, Gus? Hey, you cooking, man?
I get but the point I'm trying to make is that yeah, like there was a systematic way in which they created policies and practices to criminalize poor people and homeless people prior to the Olympics because they wanted to clear the city out. And this is something they do with every place that holds the Olympics across the world. I forgot the name of the book, but it's really good, where they actually talk about this, that there is a complete erasure of poverty in areas, but it's not that they actually like help people. They just took the people out of the city. And so that's what's going to make Atlanta accelerate gentrification faster than any other city in the United States. Before everybody else does it, Atlanta becomes the model because of what you just asked.
Wow, it's powerful, powerful, brother. Maynard Jackson, what do you think makes Maynard so complicated? Because man, from hearing stories from my grandmother, it's these like
Yeah.
intimate, cool stories. Oh, he was like a cool, laid back guy.
Mhm.
They talk about the airport, how he made sure it was black contractors, all those things. But
He
then
sure did.
Atlanta child murders, those docs, watching that, I
Yeah.
saw, he wasn't perfect. Your book, I see, dang, he missed out on this. And then I'm like, he came from such a great pedigree, right?
Yeah.
John Wesley Dobbs,
Yeah.
grandfather, Auburn Avenue,
Yep.
like you spoke about. How can you come from that but help destroy the city at the same time?
That's the most complicated thing about it, because Maynard wasn't somebody that would talk a lot about himself when he was alive. Because his history, he comes out of being kind of a lawyer for folks locked up on who were poor. Like if poor people had an issue, then he would represent them pro bono. And so it's like, and he would often do that with people who worked in labor unions. So he knew
How ironic is that, huh?
there you go, right? And he had a pedigree of knowledge about labor unionism in his early work, and that's one of the things that endeared him to the black community, is that they saw him in courtrooms. It was him and Al Horn. Al Horn was one of my favorite people. He's one that did not go to the dark side. He was the brother that was, whenever you were an activist like the Panthers, when they made their headquarters in Atlanta, whenever they got locked up because they got targeted all the time, he would be there to bail them out and help them. So shout out to Al Horn, man. He was one of my favorite people of all time. And I'm not a fan of lawyers, but Al Horn was the man. But Maynard, he had this great reputation for doing that kind of work. So of course, when he runs as vice mayor, then it's like, okay, we got to get this brother in because this could be the change. It's always that. It's just like it's like the Obama enigma. It's like, okay, this brother comes out of Southside Chicago. He got history organizing. All right, Obama, hope and change. Same thing with Maynard. The people thought that there was something there. But then, as I talk about in chapter 2, Maynard meets with specific parties that say, we think you too close to the black working class, and we're gonna run you and keep you in power because Massel's out. The mayor, he's leaving, and we're gonna need somebody who, is gonna, you know, do what we need to do, because these black folks out here going on strike and shooting at the police and building community activity. We ain't doing that. What are you willing to do? And he laid out in front of the Hungry Club, or the Hungry Forum, excuse me, that's where the elites would meet and talk about the city. This thing called the Hungry Forum. And he told them, I'm law and order. Like I'm gonna be the mayor of Atlanta. I'm gonna build Atlanta. And again, because he's black and he has that history, his constituency, because Atlanta's a black majority when he runs for mayor in 73, that he has that locked. And that's the issue, and why I call this internal neo-colonialism. This framework that we are in as black folks is that we're in a very difficult place because we have a black face in front of us, and they have a reputation. They come out of the community or come out of activism, like Andrew Young, but then they make decisions and they come out and say, I had hard decisions to make. I had nowhere else to go. And of course, we're going to be more sympathetic to them than a white person who historically has always beaten us down, right? And so that's the play of how we have this indirect rulership that he and other black mayors at this time, Detroit, Chicago, not Chicago, Harold Washington, he did a lot, so I'm not gonna put him in there with the rest of them, but he died early. Indiana, Gary, Indiana, Newark, New Jersey. You had these black mayors who had these majority black city councils, etc., that were basically creating what we call pro-growth coalitions
meaning that the interests of the people at the time that there was an oil crisis, there was a recession, all these other things, they actually used those crises to call for higher investments of corporate power in these areas. But you can't do any of those things unless you have somebody who's dedicated to building the police. And that's where Maynard comes in. And unfortunately, and again, we talk about the airport thing. Yeah, he had black contractors, but how many of those black contractors gave black folks jobs? And that's the same thing when you look at any project labor agreement today, because again, I'm a labor historian, labor scholar. When you look at project labor agreements with black contractors, they're doing the exact same thing as white contractors. They're not bringing in black workers to get union scale jobs on project labor agreements. They're bringing in cheap labor, whether it be undocumented immigrant labor or they're going and getting rural, poor white people to do jobs. They're not hiring black people in cities to do jobs. And I notice because when you look at the construction numbers right now, there's less than 6% of black folks that are working in construction in the United States right now from all of the different cities that submitted their reports. So that's how we know that there are no black folks working in construction. So the data's there to prove what I'm saying. So again, Maynard's an earlier version of that. And I feel like complicated, yes, but I think that there's a part of him that with the job application thing and the, fighting the sanitation workers and all this other stuff, there was a part of him that was petty. There was a part, he had a petty streak to himself, and the police and law and order stuff. I'm not denying he didn't care about people, because that's not what I'm saying. I believe that he truly did care about people, but because his ideology was bourgeois, then he had a different understanding of how to care about people. Give them a lot of police, make them fight and struggle instead of actually giving them support. This whole idea, that's how he cared about people, versus community activists like Ethel Mae Matthews and Louise Watley and Eva Davis, three of my favorite people to ever come out of Atlanta. Their idea was, no, you should support us. We should have resources. We could police ourselves. We don't need that. The community can build. We need education. We need to control our schools and our job spaces. That's what they believe. So in other words, you have conflicting ideologies at the heart of class warfare. And that's what Jackson represented. He was conflicting ideology of the black working class while he was in power. So very complicated person, just like Hosea Williams, very complicated people that we can't just simplify as just being they were evil or good, or, I don't do any of that. This is about class warfare where positions are played, ideologies are out there, and all of it is tied to how they feel about their relationship to capitalism. And that's the heart of where it is.
Powerful conversation, brother. I only got about two more questions for you, Gus.
Please,
You've been
no.
great, man. H. Rap Brown,
Mm,
rather, he just passed.
mhm.
Seeing that, why is H. Rap Brown not spoken about enough in Atlanta? Because, man, thinking about class warfare, I
Yeah,
think about him, right? I think about the Black Panther Party, Black Liberation Army, all these movements,
yeah.
but those are really talked about, opposed to, of course, the Andrew Young civil rights movements. H. Rap Brown, why do you feel like he's not talked about enough, Gus?
Yeah, I was actually surprised that my book is the first to mention the Black Panthers in Atlanta being this their headquarters. Like the Panthers made Atlanta the headquarters for the last duration of the movement. It's very surprising that people don't talk about that. Specifically H. Rap Brown, who I think is one of the most brilliant brothers to ever live. I have all his speeches downloaded and I listen to them all the time. H. Rap Brown is not celebrated because he talks how we talk today, but there was no internet. Because when you listen to this brother, he was so captivating when he would go in front of a crowd. He didn't have the long prepared speeches and all that. He read so much. And then, mind you, this is a cat that was in study groups from age 14 and up. And he read so much, and he was able to work with the people that he was able to. He did what I strive to do. He was able to use his intellect and match it to his work on the ground in building power for poor people, his revolutionary intercommunalism theory, like being able to actually show it in practice and not be like a lot of academics who talk in the sky, who can't really
talk about things from a practical standpoint. I think that's one of the things I tried my hardest to do with the book is that I make it accessible to all levels of society to where I'm not just talking in the clouds from an academic perspective with a bunch of 20 letter words and all this other stuff. So I always go back to H. Rap Brown is that, yeah, he would have a big word, but then he would break down what it meant, you know? And so I think that that was what made him so dangerous, just like Fred Hampton. I think H. Rap Brown and Fred Hampton were so dangerous because they could clarify what our condition, struggle, and what we need to do better than anybody else I've ever seen speak on it. And even King was very good as well. And King gets dangerous. You should listen to the speech that he gives a few years before he's killed, where he's getting interviewed. It's not a speech, it's an interview for I think NBC News or CBS News. I forgot what it was called. But if you type it in, if you type in MLK interview news, it'll first thing that pops up where he talks just like H. Rap Brown, and it becomes, whoa, wait a minute now. Yeah, he's talking about some stuff. But I think that H. Rap Brown, Fred Hampton, etc., when you have a political education that reaches the people and touches them on their day-to-day conditions, then it means something different and it can awaken the consciousness of the everyday person. So you're not just talking over their head or telling them what they should think. You're talking about what their conditions are so that they can have the agency and the autonomy to make the decision themselves, and their consciousness raises that way. And that's what's so beautiful about what they do and what I try to do. I'm not telling people what to believe anywhere in my work or my speeches. I'm showing the conditions, I'm showing what happens, and then you make the case for yourself what we should do.
Gus, brother, on the way out, what does the future of Black Atlantans look like in your own eyes?
I believe the future of Black Atlanta under this, there's an immediate and long term. Immediate, we're gonna have a lot of crisis. You know, the federal government stuff now, the way the political economy shifted after the Trump administration, in 2024 election, there's so much that has been completely dismantled that it really reshapes our thinking of what can be done here. Um, so the immediate issues are going to bring about a lot of hardship because you're talking about even if we get a new system in place
Yeah.
once the MAGA stuff goes away, you're talking about lost resources that are going to be hard to get back. And the biggest worry I have long term is that when you see any disaster that ever happens in US history, that's when the rich folks really start salivating and they start saying, well, what can we do with this to make more money off of it?
Mm.
Right? Like what happened with the Hawaiian tsunami, and all the Oprah and all them other folks went out there and started privatizing that area. Katrina, I mean, all these other things. It's like, well, again, the kind of damage that the Trump administration is doing to the resources for everyday working class people, black, brown, white, whatever, the removal of stuff. Like when he's gone, like what's going to happen there? That's when you have people swoop in, like the Elon Musk and the Jeff Bezos, and they'll say, "Well, here's the thing: I can save the system. Let me privatize this thing, like healthcare or the postal service or the federal government jobs. Let me privatize it and we can bring it back that way." That's what worries me because Atlanta leadership, the power brokers, the Chamber of Commerce, they've always had the mentality of let's let capital handle the problem. That's what scares me long term. But I do believe, though, because of this moment, because people are seeing the ravages of what capitalism and the people, like I said, the bourgeois thinkers who allow the Trumps and the others to damage things. You're seeing the youth now turn even more critical of the system of America more than they have since the 1970s. So I do have this kind of realistic hope based on my interactions with the youth that there is going to be a significant radicalism in the youth in terms of, and again, it's not radical to say We want people to have free healthcare, people to have free school, people to have free childcare, people to be able to find jobs, have a living wage. That's not radical. In other countries, that's considered just regular life. Here in America, that'd be radical, right? But you're starting to see more youth now talk about that because they're seeing the brunt of the cruelty. And that's the thing about it, is that the cruelty is bringing out a different consciousness in everyday people today. And mind you, America's always been cruel. Let's be clear. It's a structurally cruel place. But now, because of the failures of previous eras, the youth now are starting to think differently. I'm hoping that they start reading more, though. That's the one thing, they don't like to read a lot yet. So that's my hope, is that if they take part, if they take more into the reading and political education stuff, then I'm feeling very hopeful in terms of the resistance by Gen Z. I do feel very, very hopeful about that. But we're going to have a very difficult 2026, possibly 2027, because the power brokers of the country are going to try to resolve the Trump crisis through capitalism, meaning more exploitation. And that we cannot have anymore. But we also have to go international as well and make sure that people know that this is a struggle across the globe. And darker skinned people, we have to find a way to unite and understand that we're all having the same problem together. So, yeah.
Hey, same enemy, man. On the way out, Gus, man, where can everybody copy your book, follow you, stay in touch with you, all that good stuff?
Very much so appreciated, brother.
Yes,
So
sir.
you can go to the University of North Carolina Press website.
Hmm.
I don't like to tell people to get it off Amazon because I
Yeah,
have a big problem with Bezos and
yeah.
Amazon of how they treat workers, especially
Hmm.
Black folks. But you can find the book anywhere. You can type it in. You can, my main thing I want people to get, though, is that the book is not just, it's not a history book. It's a study and it's a novel of how we as Black folks have watered through the struggle of trying to find ourselves and have our right to the city of Atlanta. So I'm hoping people look at it in that way, that you can actually use it today
Yeah.
to understand the issues of today.
Yeah.
But I'm always now finally always on Instagram. It took me a while to get that going, but it's underscore Gus Wood 3 for my Instagram. You can always look for me on Facebook. I'm a professor at the University of Illinois, but I'm always in the ATL because it's my home. And just like, yeah, I'm always looking to meet with people. I'm working with the Black Alliance for Peace in Atlanta. Shout out to them. They're an amazing organization, one of the greatest organizations out there right now. Shout out to Malcolm X Grassroots Movement. Shout out to y'all, man. Y'all, I'm telling you, man, y'all, this is the kind of stuff that we need more of, man. Like, everybody's got a podcast today.
I know.
But when I went and looked up the work that y'all are doing, like, this is legitimate, critical, not just knowledge, but you have a way. We call it, like Karis one called it
Entertainment,
edutainment.
right? Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
where you're
That's the
getting
motto.
entertained, but you're learning so much, and you're
Yeah.
putting voices out there.
Thank you.
Like, any way that we can build this up and like make sure that everybody gets their hands on your work and your platforms, then that's what we need to be doing. Because that's how Antonio Gramsci said we're really going to come to liberation, is that we have to find alternative media sources and spaces that are oftentimes neglected, or what we call alternative, and we have to build them up so that they're the ones that are pushing our agenda, our issues, our voices to the forefront. And that's what I think y'all are doing with
Love,
this.
brother.
Yeah,
Gus, man, same to you, brother. You were doing truly God's work, ancestors' work. Phenomenal, man. Keep up everything. Again, brother, you are always welcome here anytime, hey, that you touch down in the city. Shoot
yeah,
me a text and we got you.
most definitely.
Ladies and gentlemen, Gus Wood, Dr. Gus Wood, man. Tap in with them. Class Warfare, cop that book. It's a great read. Stay in touch, learn, man. Share information, share knowledge. It's always good to be here, man. So blessed be your host, Caleb Smith. Until next time, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, family. Peace.